live in Ogden, Utah. This took place just a little south of that. About a year back, I was hanging out with some of my friends. I was at a youth activity thing for my church, and our bishop wanted us to go to a park to play night games. After a couple of hours of fun, it was time for us all to leave, and before I left, I had to use the restroom. As I walked over to the bathrooms toward the door, I gave it a yank, only to discover it was locked. So, as any young man would do, I made the best of the situation. I went over to the side of the building. Just as I was about to zip up, the motion lights across the building just turned on. I knew it wasn't me that set them off. What I saw under the light was the most disturbing thing. A tall and slender creature, about 3/4 of the way up the tall light. As I stared at this thing, I noticed its eyes, or lack thereof. Where I assumed its eyes would be were just black pits. I couldn't move, I was so scared, but also I felt curious. Then I watched as the creature beckoned me towards it. Yet it didn't seem like it wanted to move towards me. It just wanted me to go to it. At this point, after I was done silently freaking out, I was finally able to move. Instead of going towards it though, I turned and ran as fast as I could, making my way back to my friend's car. When I got there, they saw I was visibly upset. I slammed the door shut, demanding we leave the park as soon as possible. Once we made it back to the church, they attempted to calm me down, but they were not successful. They decided to take me to my parents, who stayed up with me all night as I cried. All I know is if that light hadn't turned on, that thing could have gotten me, and I never would have saw it coming. I grew up in the foothills, swamps, and muggy woods of South Carolina. As soon as my siblings and I hit 10 years old, we were taught to safely use and maintain hunting tools such as knives, bows, traps, and firearms. Our parents made sure to instill a respect in us for animals, especially those we took for food, and an understanding of the food chain. This particular story is from when I was around 17 years old and a fairly experienced hunter for my age. I had developed a deep love of hunting raccoons, and I took part every season. I was a black sheep in the local hunting community, though, because unlike most people my age, I refused to hunt alone. In most young hunters' minds, they picture the hunt, the kill, and the praise they would get from putting food on the table. But as I stated above, I understood that no matter how strong I was, or how big my gun was, I could always fall prey to something out there. More often than not, my usual hunting partner was my stereotypical hillbilly uncle, R. He was raised very much the same as us. He never failed to pass on a useful tip or guide me to a better location to hunt or fish. That night we were on the land off the banks of Broad River close to the North Carolina state line. We were hunting raccoons with his two best hounds, Baby Doll and Scooter. It was pitch black as the clouds hid the moon behind a thick blanket. The night was frigid and dead silent, except for the distant flow of the river and the dogs rattling around in the dog box. Looking back now, I fully understand that night hunting is not for everyone. The temperature was dipping into the single digits, and every branch our lights touched resembled long, bony fingers reaching limply out the blackness for the ground below. We geared up and did a basic check of the surrounding area to confirm it was safe to hunt. We met up at the tailgate, and with a nod, we cut the dogs loose to track. Scooter and Baby Doll were from the same litter, and their teamwork in the woods was hard to beat, despite having vastly different methods for tracking a scent. Baby Doll was notorious for bolting after a scent and covering hundreds of yards before stopping to find it again. She was like a razor blade, gliding through the dark trees and across frozen creeks. Scooter, on the other hand, was a slow mover. He stayed only just behind Baby Doll, shuffling around in the brush as a midpoint between his sister and us, who were at that moment at the truck watching them on the tracking system. He would only leave his usual post when Baby Doll found something, or if there was trouble. And that night, there would be trouble. The GPS alerted that Baby Doll had treed something, and as we watched Scooter bolt in her direction, we followed suit. We moved quickly through the frozen brush, calling to the dogs, encouraging them as we jogged deeper into the maw of the forest. I'm not sure when it happened, because of how rough the terrain became to get through at certain points, but I got separated from R and wound up alone in the dark, standing in the bottom of a deep wash with a shallow stream babbling across pebbles and tree roots. I couldn't hear the dogs anymore, and my calls to R went unanswered. I climbed back up the wall of dirt that I had slid down in my pursuit, hoping the high ground would help me carry my voice. After 2 more yells with no reply, I reluctantly tried calling his cell phone. He answered on the first ring, shouting into the phone only audible between gunshots.
Go back to the road.
Then the phone went quiet. It was then I heard the distant echoes of gunshots cascading over the silent ambience, accompanied by vigorous yips and barks. I remembered being confused for a minute, wondering what had happened and if I should try to help. I came to the conclusion that I should backtrack to the road, but every so often I would yell back to let him know where I was, if he could hear me. I walked about 50 yards and yelled back through the trees with only distant crashes and racket to answer me. I had almost made it another 10 yards when I heard a fierce ripping of vines and bushes. It was Baby Doll in a full sprint in my direction. I thought she might slow down as she got closer to me, but she never missed a beat and ran past me like grease lightning. Then another crash, and the yips I heard over the phone returned in the distance, getting closer now. I knew then why R had panicked. In their charge, the dogs had disrupted a pack of coyotes, and they were chasing them, and by association, us. I began jogging after Baby Doll, hoping to secure her in the box and get off the ground. The yips, growls, and barks were getting louder behind me. I struggled to navigate the brush in my thick winter clothes, but I kept moving, my dull yellow headlamp turning my world into a hazy blur of tree trunks and shadows. I came within view of the road and saw Baby Doll already on the lowered tailgate barking into the woods. Another shredding of brush behind me sent me into a full panic, but galloping past my legs came Scooter, mouth open, bawling as he went. I started up the hill to the truck, and my headlamp went out. I fumbled around in the darkness and made my way up the hill on my hands and knees, out of breath and hands shaking. I opened the box doors so the dogs could get inside and hopped into the bed, pulling the tailgate shut. I searched my coat pockets frantically for a light, which thankfully I found. I stood upright in the truck bed, flashlight in one hand shaking violently and rifle in the other, and then I saw them. They were like stars shining through the pitch-black darkness. Their eyes, those gleaming eyes and ravenous sounds flowed out of the tree line like a nightmare come to life. I began shooting into the trees in the air, trying to scare them enough to turn back. It didn't take long. They ran back into the trees, and the eyes soon disappeared. But I could still hear them. They were just out of view, but they were definitely there, watching me. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just jump down and get into the truck. It was locked, and R had the keys. I couldn't risk shooting where they might be because I didn't know where R was. Even if they did come into view again, I only had 4 rounds left in the magazine. I was stuck. I tried yelling to R again and again, but my voice was overrun by the pack's symphony from the trees. The cold was getting to me. The mad dash back to the road caused me to sweat heavily, and it felt like icicles were falling from my forehead. My light was dim, and my legs throbbed. Even with the circumstances as they were, I was fighting the urge to fall asleep. I tried calling R's phone a few times over the next few minutes, but no answer. On my last attempt, it went straight to voicemail. His phone must have been dead. The ruckus from the trees began to get more and more distant. Then I started to hear gunshots and brush thrashing violently. I soon found R's headlamp bouncing through the trees. When he came into full view, he was white as a sheet and out of breath. He stopped at the bottom of the hill and fired 3 more shots into the shadows, then climbed up. We rushed home after that, feeding the wood stove thick blocks until the metal popped and groaned from the heat. We were cut up, battered, frozen, shaken, and exhausted. But we went right back the next night to hunt again. There were many different creepy things that occurred around my little brother. His nickname was Time. Let's start off by first stating our mother was very cruel. If you've ever read or heard of a book called A Child Called It, that pretty much sums up how our mother treated us. She had 8 kids, but for some reason, she only treated Time and myself like garbage. Probably because we shared the same dad, while the others had a different dad. At a very early age, Time would panic every time the sun started to go down. We used to have to stay in the unfinished garage. No windows, no AC, no heat. We shared a bunk bed with very crappy mattresses. Time is 4 years younger than myself, and he was very terrified of the dark. One night, my mother had locked us in the garage for the next 3 or 4 days. She was upset because I stole food from the kitchen to feed Time and me, since she didn't allow us to eat with the rest of the family. I stole those zebra cake snack cakes. She hadn't fed us in a couple of days, and we were starving. We normally had a bucket to use the bathroom in, and a gallon jug of water, and that was it. That night I heard Time sniffling as Mom locked the door on us. I jumped down from the top bunk to look at him.
Are you okay? It's only for a couple of days. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have taken those snack cakes,
I said softly. He just shook his head. He didn't really talk much. Mostly he spoke in broken sign language. He made the sign for cookie, which threw me off, but I hopped up into my bunk and grabbed the 2 Oreos I had for him every night. I'd stolen a pack a while back, and they were getting stale now, but I always made sure he had some. I handed the 2 to him, and he smiled. He always took his time when he ate them. I went over to hop back into bed, but I noticed him staring at the garage door.
What is it?
I asked. His eyes widened, and he shook his head.
No.
He whimpered. Then he made the sign for scared. I walked back over and hugged him.
It's okay. I'm not gonna let Mom hurt you,
I promised. I always made sure to make her more mad at me, so she didn't hurt him.
No,
He said. Then he made the sign for monster. I blinked a few times and replied,
there's no monsters, remember? No such thing. Yoshi cleared them all out.
You see, Time loved Yoshi from the Mario games. Every time he got scared, I told him that Yoshi himself would protect him. It worked for almost everything. But just then, something smacked hard against the garage door, making us both jump.
No,
Yelled Time.
it's back.
It was probably just a bird. Birds get confused when it gets dark out, I told him. It did happen often. Normally it was the window in the living room, but they could easily hit the garage door as well. Time shook his head. No, it comes at night, every night. He was starting to scare me, too. What was he talking about? I lay down on the floor next to his bunk. Okay, I'll sleep right here, so nothing can get you. He threw a pillow down to me, which brought a smile to my face. We were always there for each other. I reached over and turned off the dying lamp that sat on the floor. It barely had light to it, but it was better than nothing at all. Pretty soon I could hear Time whimpering again. I grabbed our emergency flashlight, which I hid under his bunk, and I turned it on. It was dim normally, but if clicked twice, it had a bright strip of light down the side to light up the whole garage. I sat it on the floor, sitting up so the whole room glowed. A shiver ran down my spine. Why is it so cold tonight? It's July, I asked, pulling my quilt down from the top bunk. I glanced at Time, who was now focused on the far corner of the garage. What is it? But I was cut off by a loud boom. Seconds later, from the direction of the door, our mother called down.
Quiet down there.
Was basically what she said. That boom had not come from my mother's direction, so it wasn't her. Now I was frightened. There was no way it could have been a bird either. Hungry, Time said, sitting straight up in his bunk. I know, buddy. I'll get us some food once Mom takes her sleepy meds. Oh, he's hungry. This stopped me dead. Who? Was all that came out. Time stared at the garage door. He wants in. This panicked me. Never had I felt so scared before. I hopped up and shone the light over to the garage. Nothing was in the room with us, but I could see something moving around by the crack of the door. Then another boom. It tried to open the door. That's why I could see out of the door now. The metal lock had stopped it, but the door was old and the lock was old too. It was coming undone. This didn't look good. I thought it was probably a homeless man trying to get in. I looked back at my little brother and put my finger to my lips. He nodded in understanding. I pulled a little pocket knife my dad had given me out. If he stuck his fingers through the door crack, I was going to cut him. My heart pounded in my ears, but I knew if I told our mother, she would just punish us worse, calling us liars. I really didn't even think about telling her at the time. Then, I heard this weird screeching noise as I edged closer to the door. A lump stuck in my throat. What can make a sound like that? A raccoon? That idea made me feel a bit better, but something in my gut said whatever was on the other side was dangerous. I looked over to the lock. I noticed a roll of duct tape next to it. That could help. Quickly and quietly, I pulled a piece of duct tape from it. It was way louder than I expected it to be. I froze as I heard whatever was on the other side run or hop to the other end of the door. Had I scared it? I ripped more duct tape off, sticking it around the lock. I'm not sure if it would help at all, but it did make me feel a bit better. Then, what sounded like nails on a chalkboard rang out. This lasted for what felt like ages, but was probably less than a minute. Time squeaked, but buried his head in the blanket to stifle it. I ran back over to my brother, and I hopped into the bunk with him. What was that? I said, as softly as I could. Time grabbed the flashlight and turned it off. Monster, he said. Why'd you turn the light off? I asked, a bit alarmed. He shrugged. He don't like it, he replied. Then he signed, angry. I didn't know what to think. "How do you know that?" I asked. He didn't answer for a while, but soon he said to me, "Talks to me every night." This really freaked me out. "What does he say to you?" Time fumbled with the flashlight. "Once in," he finally said. Then he pointed to himself. At first I thought he meant inside the garage, but then it hit me. "Is it a demon or a ghost?" I asked, my body shaking all over. He shrugged and simply said, "Monster." A monster wanted my brother. These words echoed through my head. Curiosity took hold of me. "Have you seen it? What does it look like?" He turned the flashlight on dim so I could see him better. He signed, "Scary, tall, nasty." We really didn't know sign language entirely, so a lot of what he signed was broken. There was no way this was happening. Bang, bang, it hit the garage again. I was hoping Mom had taken her sleep meds and passed out already, or we'd be in bigger trouble if we survived this. Time grabbed my arm, and I looked back at him. He whimpered, "In, monster, trying." I didn't know what to do, so we just sat there, hoping it wouldn't get in. I must have passed out, because when I opened my eyes, light was starting to poke in through the garage door. Time was still asleep. I softly got out of bed and went to the door to the house. I used my pocket knife to slip the lock open and peeked out. It was still very early. Everyone was still asleep, and our stepdad must already be at work. I crept out and went straight for the front door first. I held my breath as I slowly opened the door and peered out. Nothing was there. I closed the door behind me as I walked over to the garage. There were a bunch of dents in the door, and now I knew why. Tears ran down my face. It was real. That wasn't even the worst of it. On the ground next to the door were huge footprints. These looked like dinosaur footprints. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Four-toed, giant, dinosaur-like footprints. What even was I looking at, I wondered. I had never seen anything like it. I remembered from Jurassic Park how the T-Rex's prints were, and these reminded me of that. Not exact, but it was the closest thing I could think of. There's no way a dinosaur just tried to get into our garage, though, right? I shook my head at the idea. This wasn't possible. The strange sounds it made, how it talked to time. This was something way strange. I quickly went back inside and into the kitchen, stealing some food that wouldn't be missed, like I always had to do. I would take baggies and fill them with cereal, cookies, or whatever was open that wouldn't be noticeable. Then I ran back to the garage. Putting the lock back was the trickier part, but within minutes I had gotten it. I woke up Time and gave him some food. He smiled and ate happily. After a few minutes, he asked me, "Monster gone?" I nodded. "Yes, it went away. How many times has it been here?" I asked. All those dents weren't from last night alone. There was no way. He paused a moment, swallowed his food, and held up his hand, showing me 5 fingers. 5 times? In a row, or? He held up 3 fingers. Last night makes 3 in a row. A shiver ran down my spine. What was this thing? And why did it want my brother? I ride horses at a barn in Michigan, along with some of my really good friends. The following story is an encounter my friend Jay had. One late evening at the barn, Jay finished up riding and taking care of his horse. so he began to set off for the night. Now, our barn rests on an extensive string of dirt roads surrounded by mostly forest. It's quite desolate, and there's an eerie feeling to it after it gets dark. So Jay leaves the barn and turns his beloved Jeep onto the first small dirt road leading away from the barn. As his headlights meet the road, they illuminate what appears to be a large dog right in the middle of the road. Jay figured the dog belonged to a farmer in the area and decided to not approach the animal, but to rather flick it with his high beams in hopes that it would get the hint, then move along off the road. But the dog-like creature turns its head in Jay's direction. Jay notices it's hunched over an unidentifiable animal on the road, eating it. The canine-like creature proceeds to get up and begins to run into the woods, like a man on his hind legs. Jay, in shock, speeds the heck out of there. It's a short story, and I wish I could give more information. But for me, knowing there is a bipedal dog creature roaming right near where our horses sleep, it's enough to give me the creeps at night. After hearing this story, and seeing the absolute truth in his face when he tells it, I'm afraid to be at the barn alone after dark. I hope to never meet the Michigan Dog Man myself.